Ladies and gentlemen, this is an amazing occasion. We live in the best time for chess. We're about to watch Hikaru take on Magnus in a 3-hour match. And Robert, I'm going to have to lean back from the screen. I'm going to have to keep my own composure because I can't even imagine how the players feel right now.
Well, Magnus Carlsen, he has got those arms crossed. Hikaru, he's dressed sharply for the occasion. And here we go. Nakamura with the white pieces in game one. We see him use the king's pawn. No bong clouds today. I don't think we're going to see that. We get knight f3, knight c6, and a Spanish, Tanya.
Spanish, both of these players, we expect them to bring their A game from the very first moves. No 1a3, no 1g4 from Hikaru Nakamura. He is taking this seriously. And Magnus, repeating what he played against MVL, clearly indicating that he wants to play a Marshall, and he does.
We get that Marshall, and it's c6 this time. So Magnus Carlsen, he is kind of mixing it up here, causing some problems for Hikaru, you would think, except for the fact that Hikaru is playing instantly. He is well prepared.
And Magnus has played the Marshall before. C6 is the main move. Against MVL, Carlsen was playing the sideline, bishop b7. That has surprise value. This has the reputation. And notice Hikaru putting his pawn on d3. Robert, this line got very popular about 10 years ago. I think Vichy Anand was the first to popularize it at the highest level. Generally, it's considered a risk-free way to fight for a small advantage. And often, white actually ends up giving up the extra pawn.
And look at this move, queen h4. The bishop on f5 was under attack, but h2 was a checkmate threat. So that's why the pawn went to g3 to blunt the bishop on d6. Now the queen slides up into the compromised light squares, protecting the bishop on f5. And if that bishop can join the queen in the kingside party, there could be a checkmate against the white king.
Oh, absolutely. That's why the Marshall was invented. Frank James Marshall was one of the greatest attacking players of the late 19th, early 20th century. And nowadays, the Marshall is often used as an equalizing weapon. Engines have breathed new life into this line. And what you often see White doing here is quickly bringing this knight up to e4. Robert, White has to start developing his queenside, or there will be hell to pay on the e-file.
And he does bring his knight to d2, but look at this. Black is taking advantage of the fact that white lacks development. The move f5 is played. The rook on e1 is loose, but the bishop on d6 is also loose. But you take a bishop, you lose a rook. That might not be a good trade. And wow, what a concept here. Sacrificing a piece to win it.
Whoa, look at this. Oh, they're following. I had a game just like this against Ding in the Pro Chess League 2 years ago. I remember this move.
Bishop f3 check catches Hikaru by surprise. He looks upset right now. And the point is that the king is dragged to the f3 square. Rook takes f4 is check. You win one pawn, and then you're going to win the pawn on e4 next by force. And remember, just because the knight is pinned, it still protects that rook on f4. You can't play king takes rook. The knight covers the square.
Pinned pieces protect. You cannot take the rook. The rook takes the pawn. Material equality has been restored. And I hesitate to use the words dead draw because both of these players, Robert, they are known for their ability to squeeze a win out of the most unlikely types of endgames. They can win rook versus rook. Hikaru has won a lot of rook versus rook endgames throughout his career. But with the 1 second increment and plenty of time on their clocks, I think this first game is likely to end in peace. Now, is Hikaru the one actually fighting for the edge here as he prepares c4?
Some people like the rapper Hoodie Allen. Others might like Hoodie Carlsen over here. He has his hood up over his head. He wants to be the Grim Reaper. Right now, it's even material. You're talking about the move c4, but let's talk about the king side. Black has a healthier pawn structure on g7 and h7. So it's clear what Hikaru's intentions are. He wants to push that pawn, go after the targets on the queen side. And I have to say that if white isn't careful, if the game is prolonged, I feel like the knight being able to hop from color complex to color complex can be very dangerous in this position.
That's a fantastic point. The bishop obviously has to stay on its initial color, and the knight with every move switches to a different color. And speaking of switching to a different color, the knight hops back to e7 and then forward again to f5. And I think the point of this move is to keep the integrity of black's queenside pawn structure alive. If c takes b5, black can actually take either way, but I like a takes b5 to keep the c-file shut.
I like the look of that as well. The knight on e7 is doing an important duty. And this king went to f8, right? It's out of the bishop's path. The king can keep marching towards the center. King e8, king to d7. And the white king at some point would probably want to go the f3 square, but the rook can even go over to h4, putting pressure on that isolated pawn on h2. So I feel like for Hikaru, he doesn't really have something to threaten just yet. And because black's pawn structure is healthier and Magnus is a healthy minute and a half up on the clock, I prefer his chances.
I agree, and Hikaru should, I think, take the first opportunity to repeat moves if he can make that happen. There is a repetition with king f3, rook h4, and then king back to g3. But black does not have to oblige. He can jump into f5 with check and simultaneously defend the rook. So with every ticking second, the likelihood that Magnus starts playing with this for a win, Robert, I'm totally on the same page, increases.
Yes,
there it is.
I'm so there. King goes after rook h4, if king g3, knight f5 check. It starts to feel like black is gaining some of the momentum in the position. So Hikaru cannot just make a draw here. And I want to give a shout out to the over 65,000 people watching this match. This is the clash of the titans. It's Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. And you do not want to miss the rest of it. I'm so glad we're just getting started. And the rook is just getting started. That is a checkmate threat. The bishop covers f7. The knight probably has to jump out the way. But Danya, the knight on e7 is doing an important duty. It's protecting the c6 pawn. So the knight jumps to, say, g6. Maybe the white rook will slide into the d6 square at some point. Or even to d7, but not yet because of the fork on e5. So knights being tricky pieces, you have to watch out for checks and forks.
Took the words right out of my mouth. You don't want to miss the rest of this match. You also don't want to miss a checkmate in game 1 of the SEC final. And something tells me Magnus sees the threat. He's thinking about how to parry it. There are alternatives. You could slide the king over to e8. You could push a pawn to g6 and create some luft on g7, but that allows the rook to run amok with rook d8 check and then back to d7. Carlsen does entrench his knight on f5. And will Hikaru now try to infiltrate the 7th rank and threaten rook f7 check? Robert, what do you think is the most clinical way here to secure the draw?
Well, look at Magnus. I mean, he just got up in his chair there. He is ready to pounce. And the reason why is rook d7 looks threatening because that check on f7. Black simply slides the pawn up to g6. It's very important to note the rook on h4 is not just an attacking piece. It is protecting that vulnerable pawn on h7. Point. So rook d7, it threatens to win a piece. You can just protect that piece, keep your pawn safe and sound. Now the c6 pawn, that's the target you want to have. And let's talk about something long-term, Danya. We should not forget to mention that if white can play pawn b3 and pawn a4, there is some potential for an outside pass pawn as this game continues. So that's what Magnus needs to keep an eye on.
That's a great point. And what you're showing is that this is still a 3-result game. It's not like black has target practice here. Magnus has to keep that in mind. Bishop c2 by Nakamura. No, he is not blundering a fork on d4 because the king will slide over to g3 and Magnus will have to spend a tempo as he just did to defend the rook. The bishop is going to move away from c2. You can also protect it with rook d2. You can just sense that Magnus has the initiative. He's calling the shots. But for the time being, Robert, there's basically nothing to attack. That king on g3 is perfectly situated from a defensive point of view.
And at some point, you have to be on the lookout for bishop takes h7. Because the rook on h4
like now
gets distracted. What's wrong with it?
Nothing. It wins a pawn. And it forces Magnus to enter the defensive.
Right. If the rook takes... And they both miss it. They both completely missed that option. I mean,
oh my gosh.
That was a pawn that, if captured, distracts the rook away from the defense of the knight. So I'm a little confused what the players are seeing. Maybe we are missing something, but I don't think so. I think that was just a hanging pawn.
I don't think so, Robert. I think this is pre-match jitters. The match has just started. Listen, these players... Hikaru has noticed it. Yep, you can just tell in the body language, how could I have missed bishop takes h7? A little bit of jitters here to start the match from both players.
And Magnus Carlsen's talking to himself. He's like, where do I get these winning chances from? I'm up a minute on the clock. I'm better. c5 looks like a great move. He takes the bishop, which is surprising.
I like it.
But objectively, it might be best. Look at the evaluation bar. Better for black. What's his idea? King activity. In the end game, the king is a weapon. It's an aggressive piece. He doesn't go up. Why not?
King d5 and rook d4, and the pawn endgame is winning due to the massive disparity in king activity. Now, Robert, you pointed out that white could create a passer on the queen side. Well, black can do the same thing on the other side. Imagine if the rooks are off the board. c5, c4, and then b4, c3. That's a lot of pawn moves, but white is nowhere near creating a pass pawn either. So I think Magnus should go for the win here, but he's black. It's game 1. Maybe he wants to play with an abundance of caution, and I'm kind of surprised.